Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, managing editor over at Wide Right Natty Light on the SB Nation Network, and been a guest on Mark Rogers' show a number of different times over the years. I've also been a guest on on our Iowa show with Corey Breda as well, especially for Iowa State matchups. So you may have seen me around, but if you're new to the channel, really appreciate you tuning in. We are here every single Tuesday. Excuse me. We're here every single Tuesday, or most every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. So this time right now, we usually go live over on Twitter as well as on YouTube, which we're at right now. Would really appreciate if everybody that can, subscribe over on YouTube. I'll pull up the screen. I'll pull up the page here so everyone can see what's going on. And can see just see the page anyways. So right there on YouTube, you can see we've got, don't mind my video I was watching. You can see over here, getting going here, just started in December. We're working our way up here. But I really appreciate anybody that wants to tune in. This show is always a live Q&A as well. So if anybody has any questions, I'm definitely more than happy to answer that. I'm also going to throw the link in the chat to join in as a caller. So I will throw that in here right now. And we take some callers during the show to get comments, whatever it is, just kind of like an old school radio show, but you can chime in. You can use your video if you didn't want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But anyways, appreciate everybody that is tuning in. This week, we are going to talk a little bit about the NFL. Well, we're going to do a nice little special here on the NFL draft because Iowa State had maybe its best and most important NFL draft in school history this past weekend. Let's talk a little about the draftees. We'll talk about the undrafted free agents. And then if we have a little bit of time at the end, we will also talk just a touch about a recent basketball transfer as well. So that'll be at the end if we've got a little bit of time. But main focus today, we're talking about the NFL draft, and I might also touch on a little bit later too, since now that spring practice is wrapped up, then we might talk about a few things that that we've kind of heard in some comments from Matt Campbell, especially last week, about roster limits and things like that. So first up on the docket here, as I mentioned, is that Iowa State had the best draft class in school history. It might not necessarily be by a wide margin if you look at the 2021 draft. Well, the 2022 NFL draft when Will McDonald got drafted. Actually, no, that's in draft. Brock Purdy went in the seventh round. Charlie Kohler was drafted. Chase Allen was picked up in an undrafted free agent status. Breece Hall was taken. It was a big draft all the way around. After the 2021 season, so the 2022 draft, and you had so Will McDonald was the year after in the first round, but you had a number of draft picks there, and obviously Brock Purdy in the NFL has turned into if that whole thing was redrafted, Brock Purdy's probably a first round pick, if not first or second round pick in that draft. I'd have to go back and check the class and just see who's all panned out, but I mean Brock Purdy turning into an obvious starting NFL quarterback, and so on his best day when the 49ers are healthy, you could make a very good argument that he's maybe a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So you have that. Charlie Kohler has started to carve himself out a nice role on the Ravens, and I would expect his role will continue to expand as Mark Andrews gets a little bit older and maybe doesn't re-sign with the Ravens. And then you've got Breece Hall is Breece Hall, who's been one of the best running back when he's been healthy. Obviously he got hurt during his rookie season, in which he was probably on pace to be rookie of the year. But he gets hurt in that rookie season, but has otherwise been healthy and very productive on bad Jets teams with bad offensive lines. So it'd be nice if Breece Hall can be relieved from the scourge that is the New York Jets. But he has still been very good, and when he's at his best and when he's got a team around him that is competent, he is one of the 5 best running backs in the NFL. So you have that draft. But I want to tell you why this draft was the best in Iowa State history. You have 2 receivers that go in. Jaden Higgins is one of the first picks of the second round, and then Jalen Noel goes in the third round to the same team, to the Houston Texans. And then you've got Darren Porter in the third round, and then you've got Jalen Travis in the fourth round. So you've got day 2 picks, you got multiple day, you got 3 day 2 picks, and then you've got another day, you had another day 3 pick, and then I believe we're at 5 undrafted free agents have signed. There might be a 6th if I missed, but I know for sure we have 5. Um, just a remarkable thing to really establish Iowa State, who's had draft picks and all in the last 5 years, I believe, and has started to put not just a player on a roster in the NFL, like, if you remember back the days when he had like a Tuba Rubin was on the Cleveland Browns, and you're like, oh my gosh, he got a couple special team snaps, or you had can't even remember. Alvin Bowen got a few snaps for the, Alvin Bowen got a few snaps for the Bills back in the day. Then obviously AJ Klein had a very nice NFL career. For a long time, AJ Klein that was Iowa State's guy in the NFL, and Leonard Johnson had some time in, but that was even like during the Paul Rhodes era. If you go back to like the McCarney era, they just didn't put people in the NFL. They just didn't. Obviously they didn't have first round picks for a long time until Will McDonald, but they just didn't have players in the NFL that mattered for a long, long time. Now you've got a host of you've got Brock Purdy, you've got Dave Montgomery, you've got Breece Hall, you've got Will McDonald, you got TJ Tampa on the Ravens, who's I think it's expected to take a pretty big jump going into the next few seasons here. I think he's expected to take a pretty big jump. And now you've got a couple more receivers, you got an offensive lineman, you've got another corner in the NFL. I would say it's starting to get a significant name recognition in the NFL, and it's now a program that scouts and organizations really, really respect now. Just knowing the kind of players that Matt Campbell has been putting into the NFL. John Lynch had some glowing words about the Iowa State football program last week. We've heard good comments from the Texans GM, obviously. Big fan of Iowa State players, as we'll get into here in just a little bit. And the Jets have talked about Iowa State guys. Iowa State now is a program that they're developing a reputation and have developed finally a reputation where scouts will make a point to go to Iowa State's pro days and things like that. Now they have Big 12 pro day, so there's not really a pro day there, but they make sure to put scouts in the stands during regular season games and things like that, and keep an eye on Iowa State football players, because the program has such a good reputation in the league now that you really have no choice but to pay attention and see who's coming up, especially because you look at who's on and who's coming up right now, who could be kind of next up. I would say the next big name that comes out for Iowa State is probably not next year, but the year after, when you have Rocco Becht coming out next year. And I mean, technically Rocco is eligible for the draft after this season. I think just based on him not having like prototype size, I think he would be if he left after his redshirt junior year, I mean, I don't think he would anyways, but even if he did, he would have to have a pretty remarkable 2025 season, I think, to be in contention to be a day 2 pick or something like that. I think his size just doesn't help him at all. And for better or worse, the NFL, for all their faults in quarterback talent evaluation, or really honestly talent evaluation across the board, but especially at the quarterback position where it's just so hit or miss, and they're kind of guessing a lot. The size thing is going to hurt him just the same way it did Brock Purdy. Now, that said, Brock Purdy being as good as he has been in the NFL is excellent news for Rocco Becht, because it's same body type, a little bit undersized, decent but not amazing arm, accurate, kind of a gamer. You could argue maybe Rocco's better in the clutch than Brock Purdy was in college. You could also argue that Rocco's got better fundamentals right now as far as not throwing off his back foot and things like that. Now, Brock doesn't really do that much anymore now that he's been in the NFL and has professional quarterback coaches and all this, right? And not taking a dig at any Iowa State quarterback coaches, but you could see there's a marked improvement from Brock in college versus Brock being able to focus on football as a full-time job, and it is his job to be good at football. Now, you can see a marked improvement. And that can only help Rocco. The longer Brock stays good, that can only help Rocco Becht going forward as far as his draft stock goes. That said, for him to be a real factor in next year's draft, I think he would have to explode this year. Like I'm talking like be a dark horse Heisman candidate type. Iowa State's a Big 12. Yeah, Iowa State's in the Big 12 championship game again. Maybe in the playoff, whatever it is. I think Rocco would have to have a pretty incredible season to be in like a factor to be drafted next year. Because he'd have to be good enough to have a good enough draft grade to convince him to leave early, which I don't know that he would. So it's a pretty big leap. But I did see there was a too early 2026 draft that had Rocco as the 18th overall pick in the first round of next year's draft, which like I said, there I think a lot of mountains would have to move for that to become a reality. But if that did become a reality where Rocco has suddenly played himself into first round pick conversation for next year's draft, Iowa State has had an incredible football season. Like I'm talking Big 12 champion in the playoff, that kind of thing. Rocco's maybe a fringe Heisman contender or even an actual Heisman contender. Many things have gone extremely well for Iowa State if that is somehow the case. So I hope he plays into that conversation, but right now I wouldn't lean on it. But otherwise, as far as kind of future NFL picks, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily one on the roster that immediately right now projects as a high pick in next year's draft. There are a couple guys on the roster that I think with big seasons could be there or could play themselves into that. The first name that comes to my head would be like Chase Soul, who's got at the receiver. He's got the size that if he is as good as we think he can be, Chase Soul is absolutely a type of body that the NFL likes to draft. Jaden Higgins went early because he can do a lot of things well. I think if Chase Soul can follow the same development curve that Jaden Higgins did, you're obviously in a recipe there for a good pick. Xavier Townsend, it has the athleticism there. I say it'll have to really get the ball in his hands quite a bit and really take advantage of that to see him rise a ton, I think, just because his size will hold him back. On the defensive side of the ball, Dominique Orange is probably if Iowa State's going to have a day 2 or better pick next year, it's probably going to have to come from Dominique Orange. I just think his explosiveness on the defensive line, he's continued to slim down a little bit. I realize I've kind of skipped the thing to future NFL prospects, but I'm on the train now, so we're going to keep going. Dominique Orange is your best hope. His explosiveness, his size. I think NFL scouts will love him going into the draft process next year if he decides to leave. And if a lot of this can change too with the house settlement, and if they have a 5th year of eligibility where he could come back again if he really wanted to or whatever. I think Dominique Orange's draft grade will be good enough that he'll probably leave after this coming season. We'll see. The linebackers right now are probably too young. Caleb Bacon, I don't know I think he might be too much of a late bloomer, but he could be a day 3 pick, I think, if he can stay healthy and put together a really good season this year. I think Caleb Bacon could be an interesting day 3 pick as a stand-up edge rusher. Jeremiah Cooper is interesting. I think he's got to really have a nice season this year. He's go back to his Big 12 all defensive team form of his sophomore season, pick off some passes. But even then, his size is going to hold him back just a little bit. Jontez Williams, maybe size is still going to be an issue there, but obviously shows all the ball skills you need. Yeah, some interesting names, but it's guys that are going to have to rise up and put themselves in that category right now. For next year, it's probably going to be Dominique Orange, and then we'll see. But it'll be interesting going forward. So the big news of the weekend, though, was Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll going to the Houston Texans. This was a funny moment, especially for Iowa State fans, and I know for myself as well, because during the second round, I was out to dinner with my family last Friday. Last Friday, I was out to dinner with my family, and I believe at the time the Texans had already taken Jaden Higgins, and I was like, we were watching the ticker in the third round and just seeing where they're going to go, who's going to pick up Jalen Noel. There was tons of teams that needed receivers. The Patriots needed one, and the Cowboys could use one, and all these different teams could use a receiver. And they just kept passing and passing and passing and passing. And I was like, I saw the Texans there. I was like, that'd be pretty funny. I don't think they will since they just took Jaden last round, but it'd be pretty funny if the Texans took Jalen. And sure as shit, about 2 minutes later, bang, Texans select Jalen Noel. So for anybody that's not an Iowa State fan and not familiar with the situation, the Texans already have a receiver from Iowa State, Xavier Hutchinson, who left at Iowa State as one of the all-time leading receivers and has played a couple of really nice years there in Houston. And I think he still has a role on the team going forward. Obviously, they just drafted 2 receivers to compete with him, but if you didn't like Xavier Hutchinson, you probably weren't going to draft Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. So I don't think this is them, drafting over Xavier Hutchinson. I think this is them trying to find the right mix and understanding that all 3 of those guys can help. So the Texans, not only do you have 1 receiver, you have 2, not 2, but 3 Iowa State Cyclone receivers and 3 of the best 5 or 6 receivers in school history. All on the same team right now. So there's a lot of Iowa State fans that were already 49er fans because of Brock Purdy. They just got a lot more Houston Texan fans as well, a lot more Houston Texan Iowa State fans as well. Now that you have 3 Iowa State receivers and 3 beloved Cyclones as well, 3 excellent human beings, and 3 guys that do things, that do different things well. Jaden Higgins, absolutely, like across from Nico Collins. Jaden Higgins has the body and the skill set to be a wide receiver 1 at some point in his career. Now he's going to share the field with Nico Collins, who is a very good receiver. So he doesn't have to be wide receiver 1 right away, but he'll be on the field immediately. I think Jalen Noel absolutely will have contention to be there. He can return punts and kicks. They can put him in the slot. I heard some great comps about Jalen Noel over the past couple weeks, basically saying Jalen Noel is Julian Edelman, but with sub 4.4 speed. And I think that is a great player style comp. There's player comps are a funny thing because a lot of times people like to take, when they see a player comp, they say, if I would have said, coming out of college, Brock Purdy's play style looks a lot like Russell Wilson. Now they keep it on this is when Russell Wilson is still really good in Seattle. This isn't, washed up Russell Wilson that's in where he's at, Pittsburgh now. This isn't the washed up Russell Wilson. This is still very, very good, MVP candidate Russell Wilson. If I would have said Brock Purdy plays a lot like Russell Wilson, that's his player comp coming out of college, people are saying, oh my gosh, you think he's as good as Russell Wilson? I didn't say that. What I did say is that his play style is very similar. Fine, but not great arm, accurate, can create on the run, smart guy that's very coachable. That was a good player comp from Brock Purdy, and that has absolutely borne itself out on the football field, where Brock Purdy has been very good through his first couple seasons there through the first 3 seasons of his career, and in 2 as the starter in San Francisco. He's done very, very, very well for himself. And if the 49ers can get some pass catchers and an offensive line in front of him and stay healthy through this year, he can, the 49ers can be a playoff team again. So when you say Jalen Noel's player comp is Julian Edelman with 4.4, sub 4.4 speed, that's not saying that Jalen Noel is necessarily going to be a fringe Hall of Famer. Maybe Julian Edelman just is a Hall of Famer. If he's not, he's, in the Hall of very good. If that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be as good as Julian Edelman was, but that's the player comp, and he is faster than Julian was objectively. So, he is perfect for modern NFL offenses that like to just take fast skill guys and just get them the ball in space, get them on creative route trees, on screens, whatever it is, get the ball into their hands. And Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins have both shown explosive ability at the college level against very good defenses. And I have no doubt in my mind that the Texans will find a great way to get them the ball, especially since they've got their quarterback. CJ Stroud is a very good quarterback. It's not like they're going to, these crap teams with no QB. You know, they're not going to the Jets. They're not going to the Steelers. They're not going, you know, to, I don't know, trying to find someone else's situation. They're not going to the, the Titans, which, granted they got Cam Ward, but we don't know anything about him. They're not going to the Saints or something like that. They're going to a team with a very good quarterback and an established passing game. So that bodes extremely well for them going forward. And, being high picks, the Texans will be motivated to put them on the field right away. And I think they're both plenty capable of handling that. So, it's super cool. Those guys are like, Jaden and Jalen were roommates. Those guys were like best friends in college. And, if you go back and watch Jalen's video of when he got the call from the Texans GM, he was like crying. And like one of the first things he told his family was that he gets to go meet up with Jaden again. And which, as a Cyclone fan, brings you to tears a little bit, puts a tear in your eye, because those guys are best friends. They get to go now play in the same receiver room again in the NFL, both realizing their dreams, their childhood dreams, and getting to do it together on the same team. Gosh, it's such a cool thing that was able to happen. And did the Texans need to take another receiver there? I don't know. Probably not. But I'm glad they did. I think they're going to really be happy getting both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel for the future. I think they're going to be fabulous. And I hope someday, if it's in the preseason or whatever, sometime I want to see the Texans run out 3 receivers on the field. And I want to see Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Xavier Hutchinson. I want to see the 3 Cyclones on the field at the same time. I think that would be incredible. That would be such a good moment for Iowa State to say, you know what, we're here. We're not just putting a lineman or a tight end or whatever. And we've got guys at every position group in the NFL that can play. And I think it's a neat moment that was able to be had there. Next up was in the 3rd round. It was actually before Jaden Higgins, but Darian Porter to Las Vegas Raiders. This is a great one. I love this pick. This is another success story in the history of Iowa State and position switches late in a career and turning them into a different player. The famous first example, especially for Iowa State fans, was Joel Lanning, who was a quarterback and then was switched to a middle linebacker in the 2017 season and was an All-American and was an first team All Big 12 linebacker. And, that was a big story. Darian Porter, coming out of Bettendorf High School here in the Quad Cities in Iowa, came out as a 4x1 and a 4x2 state champion. I believe he also held the record for the 100-meter dash and the 200-meter dash at Iowa in the state of Iowa coming out of high school. And was an incredible athlete, played receiver. Oh, the Dukesters in the chat. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. They said, love your content. Been listening for a while. And I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you tuning in. So Darian Porter, excellent athlete, tall. He's like 6'3", 6'4", rangy, but came into college very thin, very underweight, needed to put on weight. And just as a receiver was just never able to get on the field. Part of it was just there was a lot of talent in front of him, but it just never quite clicked there. And then a couple years ago, they moved him to cornerback, which was a fascinating thing because we knew what kind of athleticism and physical build he had available to him, and he had already established himself as an elite special teams player. By the end of his college career, Darian Porter was the only player in college football to have blocked a field goal 4 seasons in a row. Or a field goal, either just field goals or field goals and punts, but he had blocked a kick 4 seasons in a row, which is a remarkable thing. So he was an elite special teams player. I would argue probably the best special teams player in college football, the most valuable one. And then he also turned himself into a very, very good corner prospect. When you can run, when you can be a 100-meter, 200-meter sprint champion, have a huge long jump score in high school as well, and then a body you're 6'4" with sprinter speed and tons of athleticism and long arms, that is asking for a guy that if he can get the mental part and the skill part of the cornerback position down, that's a dangerous player. And if you think about lots of guys in the NFL that have been oversized corners that have played really well, the most recent of which, who will be a Hall of Famer at some point in his career, is Richard Sherman, who was an oversized corner coming out of Stanford, who also switched. He also switched from receiver to corner while in college. And lo and behold, who drafts Darian Porter? Our buddy Pete Carroll, former Iowa State assistant coach Pete Carroll, drafts Darian Porter to play in his zone defense. He's an oversized corner with tremendous athleticism. Now, he doesn't talk nearly as much as Richard Sherman did, but he can be a vocal leader on the team. He's a great locker room kid, hard worker. I tell you what, I mean, you can plug him on special teams right away. He's going to play on special teams immediately. I tell you what, if Pete Carroll can turn Richard Sherman into a Hall of Fame NFL corner, Darian Porter's got the same athleticism, the same size, and that kind of thing to be a very, very good cornerback in the NFL. He's still kind of a project right now because he's so new to the position. He's only played it for a couple years. But Hank Poteet at Iowa State did a great job with him, getting him up to speed and converted over. I think it's a fascinating thing. There was a reason that Darian he just flew up draft boards and over the last couple months because we were like, holy shit, like this guy's a good corner in college, and he's got so much room above him because of his size and athleticism that you know, as an NFL scout and NFL GM, you love to see a guy that can immediately be plugged in on special teams and can play in a zone, and then you can develop him further into being, you know, if the light truly comes on and he can get it down, he's got the size and athleticism to be a full-on lockdown corner in the NFL, like shut off an entire side of the field good in the NFL. So just I love his story. I think he's going to be awesome in the NFL, and I think he went to the perfect coach and the perfect system to take advantage of what kind of player he can be. So couldn't be prouder of Darian Porter. Dukester's got a question here for who is the GOAT of Iowa State football. I will answer your question. I'm going to do it after my draft recap though, because I think this is it's an interesting question, but it's got a very obvious answer, but I think it's worth talking about. So I will come back to your question. So after Darian, so you had Jaden Higgins to the Texans, Darian Porter to the Raiders, and then Jalen Knoll to the Texans, and then your last actual drafted player was Jalen Travis, who you know, he was just at Iowa State for a year. He came as a grad transfer from Princeton. They did recruit him out of high school, but obviously went to Princeton, had a great career there. Came to Iowa State. He didn't play the first couple games because he was still recovering from an injury, but they did a great job managing that. And then once he was healthy, you plugged him in at left tackle. He was the best tackle. He was the best and most consistent offensive lineman on the team. One of the better linemen in the Big 12, and gets his due. With the Indianapolis Colts are getting drafted. I think he's got a great shot to be good and just a 10, 12, 15 year pro in the NFL. He's got size. He's got tremendous size that scouts love. He's like 6'6", 6'7", 330. He's a massive human being and is a very smart guy that will pick up on stuff pretty quickly. I'd bet dollars to donuts that Jalen Travis plays in the league for at least a decade. He's got that kind of guy written all over him. I couldn't be happier for him. I don't have a lot to say because he was only with the team for a year, and he's offensive lineman, so it's a little bit harder to just evaluate everything. But awesome for him. Then we'll go to the undrafted guys, which I'm going to pull up. We've got an article up over on widerightnattylight.com that has all of these here. That's got the announcements for all the guys. So undrafted guys, Steve Klotz was drafted. Oh, sorry, not undrafted. He wasn't drafted. He was undrafted, but Steve Klotz signed a contract with the LA Chargers. For anybody that you'd have to be a real college football sicko to know who Steve Klotz is, but he was Iowa State's H-back and another tight end for Iowa State. That Matt Campbell has typically year in year out has had an H-back and F-back type. Kind of what the old school fullbacks used to be, but more of a pass catching role than maybe they used to have. Kind of similar to the fullbacks, like in the old West Coast offenses in San Francisco and things like that. He's going to go there. The kind of guy that Steve Klotz can be, I think his best role If you think of Kyle Juszczyk in San Francisco, that is the kind of player that Steve Klotz can be. That is what his general skill set. He's a good run blocker, but he is an effective pass catcher that's got kind of sneaky good wheels. He is faster than you think he is. I think that's a guy that he'll make a team. I'm not sure exactly what his role is going to look like, but he'll make a team for sure. And maybe it's as a fullback, H-back type thing. Maybe it's as a tight end. I'm not sure, but he'll make a team. Next up was Jared Hufford, also going to the Las Vegas Raiders. So obviously puts another offensive lineman into the league. This is a guy that's going to stick around too. He's got good size. He's a smart kid. He'll stick around, whether it's on a practice squad. Maybe he'll make a roster, but the Raiders need help on the offensive line, so he'll have a shot to make the roster. Yeah. J.R. Singleton, signing with the Seahawks. J.R. Singleton is an A-plus dude, had a great career at Iowa State, was super consistent up until the Kansas game of last year. Last year had played a bunch of games in a row. I can't remember. It was like 20-something games in a row. Super durable guy. He'll make a good nose tackle for the Seahawks. Another guy, all of these guys, I believe, will stick around. I don't think they're, sign a contract and they're out of the league before August type of thing. Congratulations to him. He's A-plus guy. Miles Purchase, another one. He played a ton at Iowa State. He made his kind of debut really came onto the scene for Iowa State in the Cheez-It Bowl against Clemson in 2000 after the 2021 season. And then ever since then played every single game, was a rock solid corner and just did his job. And I think that's a guy that will stick around. He's maybe a touch undersized, but I really think he's got a shot to stick around on the roster and make an impact, especially if they can get him in on special teams. I think he'll have a shot to make an impact there in Los Angeles. Last guy here is Malik Verdon. This is a signing I'm very excited about. Now, the reason he was not drafted is 100% related to his injury history and potential injury concerns going forward. Because over the last couple of seasons, he just had a lot of trouble staying healthy. His shoulder was banged up. He had a bad arm there for a while. He played basically with an entire cast on his left arm in the Big 12 championship game. Just had a lot of trouble staying healthy. That said, if he didn't have the injury concerns he did, this guy's a day 2 pick probably. He's got great size. He's like 6'2", 6'3". He's a hard hitting downhill safety that can punish ball carriers near the line of scrimmage. He's solid in deep coverage. It's probably maybe the weakest part of his game is deep coverage. But it's the weakest part of his game, but it's a very teachable weakness, and that it's just a matter of making sure his eyes are in the right spot and things like that. He can improve very quickly, and if he can stay healthy, this is going to be a hell of an undrafted signing for the Falcons. Because he's a great athlete, very good run stopping safety, can be a very good pass coverage safety. It's just the entire question with him is, can he stay healthy, and can he play 15, 16, 17 games in a football season? That's going to be the question. If he can stay healthy, this is an amazing signing. This is an all-time value signing for the Falcons. But that's the question. And that is the only reason he didn't get drafted. If he didn't have that injury concern, he's a day 2 draft pick. I have no doubt in my mind about that. So that is Iowa State's NFL class for the year. You've got some all-time players. Malik Verdon was great. Miles Purchase was great. Willis Singleton, one of the best defensive players in the Matt, or one of the most underrated defensive players in the Matt Campbell era. Jared Hufford, a good lineman. Steve Klotz, another one of the unsung tight ends of the H-backs of the world that just don't get or the fullbacks, H-backs, what I'm going to call them, that just don't get the credit they probably should have. And then one of the best probably the best individual offensive lineman of the Matt Campbell era. And then two of the 5 best receivers in school history. And couldn't be prouder of these guys. Also, Terry Porter. Didn't forget Terry Porter. Big time NFL class for Iowa State. Really impressive that they were able to get this, and what Matt Campbell has done with the program to be able to put that many guys into the NFL and really establish Iowa State as a destination for NFL scouts and NFL franchises going to look for good talent to put on their team. So Couldn't be prouder of that. Now, we will get to the Dukesters question. Who is the GOAT of Iowa State football? There is only one answer to this question, and it is Brock Purdy. But I'll tell you why it's Brock Purdy. But for the sake of, let's pick somebody that isn't Brock Purdy. I think this gets this conversation for who is like the second GOAT, second place GOAT of Iowa State football. I think this conversation gets a lot more interesting because there's a lot more names involved here. But as far as Brock Purdy goes, he is undisputedly the greatest football player, greatest football player in Iowa State history. He owns every single passing record at Iowa State except interceptions, in which he is not even in the top 5, despite having by far the most pass attempts of all time, by far the most yards of all time, by far the most touchdowns of all time. I think he owns something like 30. I think he owns like 30 something school records. He was very close to owning both the passing record and to setting both the passing record and the all-purpose yardage record in the same game against UL Monroe in 2019. I want to say it was. Now Rocco Beck has since then beat the single game passing record, but he Brock is Brock. He won the winningest quarterback at Iowa State, set all those records, and now is making a name for himself in the NFL as one of the the best young quarterbacks in the National Football League. I don't think there's really a debate otherwise. So Troy is an interesting one. So before Brock Purdy, it probably had to be Troy Davis because he was Heisman runner-up 2 years in a row, back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons. I get it. However, Brock has passed him by a mile. It's not very close. And this is not to take anything away from Troy because he was a very good football player. He was, at the time when he was in college, he was the best running back in college football. However, a lot of those stats are cumulative stats in that his workload as far as carries in a game was astronomical. He was getting so many more carries than anybody nowadays would get in a single game. He was getting the running back equivalent to back when Nolan Ryan would throw 130, 140, 150 pitches in a game and then do it again like 3 days later. That was what Troy Davis was doing. He was running behind one of the best offense. He's running behind a very, very good offensive line. Rest of the team was pretty crap. But Troy Davis was good, and that offensive line was good. Those offensive lines had guys that saw some time in the NFL, and he got a million carries. So if Troy Davis's if his production was scaled back to more normalize it with today's carries that running backs get, his stats don't look quite as good. Meanwhile, Brock Purdy is Brock Purdy. He is the face of the, as far as the public facing, Brock Purdy is by far the most recognizable name for Iowa State football. Yeah, maybe Matt Campbell himself, but as far as players go, Brock Purdy has easily the most famous name associated with Iowa State football. There's some old college football heads that remember like Seneca Wallace and things like that. Everyone loves the old highlights of Seneca Wallace, but he was only at Iowa State for 2 years. And one of those years, his second year especially, they really fell apart. Brock Purdy is Brock Purdy. Now, after Brock Purdy, this gets more complicated. You have a number of good players. You have guys like you have older guys like a Matt Blair who played, was very good for Iowa State, played in the NFL for a long time. You probably should be an NFL Hall of Famer for the Vikings. You could throw Matt Blair in there. You could throw George Amundsen in there, who was one of the, who was the last first round pick before Will McDonald, and was Iowa State's best player for a long time. You could look at Troy Davis. Great player. You can look at like all-time passing leaders. You can look at like Brett Meyer. When he left, he was the all-time passing leader at Iowa State. You can look at Seneca Wallace, who was only there for 2 years, but boy, were they a magical 2 years. I mean, he was unbelievable. But then you also got to look at Alan Lazard. Alan Lazard had an incredible career for Iowa State. He came in, hometown, borderline hometown kid, legacy recruit, came in as a four-star quarterback, or not quarterback, four-star receiver, and absolutely lived up to every single billing and has carved himself out a very nice career in the NFL so far. You know, Alan Lazard has got to be up there. Xavier Hutchinson's guy, he only played for 3 years, but put up a very good career. I think you'd have to put him behind Alan Lazard just based on kind of the legacy, how long he was at the school and stuff like that. David Montgomery is way up there. In the pantheon of Iowa State running backs, and Iowa State's had a number of very good running backs. In the pantheon, of running backs, you have Troy Davis, Brees Hall, and Dave Montgomery, and then everybody else. And frankly, you could just about put those three in any order that you want to, and pretty easily justify it. Troy had all the stats. David was, a, a, along with a handful of other guys, was instrumental in the rise of during the first era of Matt Campbell, and has since carved himself out as one of the 10 best running backs in the NFL. He's been excellent since he got to the league essentially, and has carved himself out a very nice role for the Detroit Lions. This is, but then you got Brees Hall, who he set the NCAA record for consecutive games with a rushing touchdown, and he left as one of Iowa State's all-time leading rushers, and he was a very high draft pick and has carved himself out a very good NFL career. There's a lot of names that are interesting there for the second, the second GOAT of Iowa State football. I think you could most easily encapsulate this with a Mount Rushmore type thing. If you say Brock Purdy is the Colossus statue standing on top of Iowa State Cyclone football Mount Rushmore, the four faces that are on Mount Rushmore that are not Brock Purdy, as far as just players go, I think you have to have Dave Montgomery. I think you have to have Matt Blair. I'm going to say Alan Lazard. Yeah, I think Alan Lazard, Dave Montgomery, Matt Blair. The fourth one, I think you probably have to put, it's either Troy Davis or Brees Hall, I think. I'm going to say Brees Hall. Maybe it's recency bias. Maybe it's that I was really young when Troy Davis was doing his thing. I don't really remember watching him. But if you're asking me to pick, Troy Davis had the better career because he was at Iowa State a little bit long. He had more stats at Iowa State. I think Brees Hall was the better football player. So I think that's your Mount Rushmore after Brock Purdy. But as far as the GOAT of Iowa State football, there is no other name besides Brock Purdy that can go into that spot, I think. And right now, I don't think there's a challenger on the roster right now. I think Rocco Becht is maybe like on the trajectory. If over the next couple seasons, Brock, if Brock wins, or not Brock, if Rocco wins a Big 12 title or something like that, and it eventually breaks a lot of Brock's records, then we have a real discussion on our hands. So Todd Blythe is a great poll. And Todd Blythe, when I was growing up, he was the best player at Iowa State when I was, in junior high and high school and stuff like that. And he was my favorite player kind of growing up. So I have a very soft spot for Todd Blythe, as I think most people do. But the problem is that if you rank him in Iowa State receivers just in the last 20, just since 2000, you're putting him behind Alan Lazard. You're probably putting him behind, I would say you're probably putting him behind Xavier Hutchinson. You're putting him behind Jalen Knoll. I'm not sure. He's probably on par with Jaden Higgins, though. I think if you're picking a team, you'd pick Jaden Higgins over Todd Blythe. He could genuinely be the fifth. Well, and then you got Hakeem Butler too, which he had really just one real explosive year at Iowa State. But what a year it was. That's Todd Blythe's biggest problem, is that he could be anywhere from the third to sixth best receiver just since 2000. So, like, it's not even a disrespect to Todd Blythe. There's just been that many. Matt Campbell just had an incredible. Oh, really, not just Matt Campbell. Paul Rhodes had him too. Just a ton of good receivers have come through Iowa State in the last couple decades. So I think that's Todd Blythe's biggest problem, is that he's just buried right now. He's buried on the all-time depth chart behind a lot of really, really incredible receivers. So it's not necessarily a fault to him. It's just lots of good guys in front of him. Defensively, I think if it was going to be a defensive player, it has to be Matt Blair. Will McDonald's a fascinating one. I think gosh, I didn't even think about it. Will McDonald could be up there too, because he was at Iowa State forever. Set the Big 12, the Big 12 career record in sacks. He was untouchable. Was he individually? When you look at guys like Brock Purdy and Breece Hall and Allen Lazard, they had like their presence at Iowa State was kind of bigger. It wasn't bigger than the team, but it was big enough where like everybody's like, oh, it's Allen Lazard, it's Breece Hall, it's Brock Purdy. There's a lot of like countrywide, nationwide name recognition, whereas Will McDonald probably didn't have that, and certainly not in the way he deserved, because he was the best pass rusher in college football for a couple seasons. So he didn't maybe necessarily have the nationwide name recognition to have the same kind of like cultural impact as the other guys. And maybe that's just because of his position, or because he just didn't start games for a long time. That's probably not Will McDonald's fault or anything like that. It's just because he was so good. Will McDonald was incredible. So, if you're just picking like Matt Campbell era players, you got to give some serious consideration to Will McDonald, who has an argument as the best defensive player in Iowa State history, along with Matt Blair. So there's a lot of interesting names. It's tough to figure that out, I guess. You'd almost be better off taking just Campbell era players and then everybody else, because so much of the top 5 players at each position group in school history, a good chunk of those are going to be Matt Campbell players. The best quarterback for sure. Rocco's probably going to be in that top 5 by the time he's done. Might be in the top 2 by the time he's done. And then you've got, running back, you've got Breece Hall and David Montgomery. So you've got 2 of the top 3 there. Receiver, you've got Lazard, Hutchinson, Butler, Higgins, Knoll. You've got 5 of the top 6 probably. However you want to rank those. At tight, you've got probably 3 or 4 best tight ends in school history. You've got offensive line. He doesn't have the best one, Kelechi Osemele there, but the United States had a couple other offensive linemen too. But you've got a few other guys, Jalen Travis now. Defensive line, you've got Will McDonald. Linebackers, you've got Mike Rose and Jake Hummel and Caleb Bacon. Iowa State has a pretty proud linebacking tradition, so maybe that's the spot that Matt Campbell doesn't own half of the list of the top 5 at that position. But then safeties, you've got Bo Freeler and Malik Verdon, and I got a number of other guys. Corner, you've got TJ Tampa and Darian Porter and Miles Purchase and Brian Peavy. Matt Campbell has half the depth chart at every position. On the all-time team, he's got half the depth chart at basically every position. So if you were going to rank like groups of the best players in history, you basically have to take Campbell guys and then separate out from everybody else, and then just pick the best of the rest, kind of, because it's just kind of where we're at with it, just because Matt Campbell's groups have just been so much more productive and so much more successful than past Iowa State teams. It's a fascinating conversation. So Dukester, I really appreciate all the comments and all the questions. It's a good conversation to have, especially in the off season. So let's see here. We've got just a couple minutes left. If anybody's got any questions or wants to weigh in on the GOAT conversation, whatever it is, feel free to throw that in the comments. If anyone wants to jump in and do a live call in for the show, really, we can do that too. Just got a few minutes left. Should actually say, Shy, we can get in trouble if I don't run this. So I do have a quick sponsor for you. It's a quick ad for you to enjoy.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link, and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
Kind of random shady threw at the Mississippi State helmet there. I'm not sure. Not sure if Mark's got beef with Mississippi State or not, but yeah. So we really appreciate everybody that's tuning in on these streams. We'll be here every week. And going forward, we're gonna have some more produced content. I also want to get do a couple episodes that are kind of almost a game show, like some trivia show, like some trivia and stuff like that. I think that'd be pretty fun going forward, and we can get fans and we can get viewers involved in as a kind of a fan vote on a question or whatever it is too. So that'll be fun. Let's see here. Oh, we got one more question here from the Dukester. What player going into next year is the biggest boom or bust? Fascinating. I think biggest boom or bust. I'm going to say Chase Soul. Chase Soul is one of the new transfer receivers, came from East Carolina. And obviously was able to secure his commitment over like some Miami and Florida and a few other big schools as well. He came in paired up with Xavier Townsend. The reason I'm going to say Chase Soul is because Xavier Townsend's athleticism and his experience at the Power 5 level will lead him to immediately be an immediate contributor. They'll get him the ball right away. I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be very good. I think he's going to be an integral part of the offense right away. So Abu Sama, I think, is a very good candidate for this because he has been in his career very boom or bust. He's either busted off 50, 60, 70, 80 yard runs or done almost nothing. So I think Abu Sama is a great answer for this. It's certainly not a wrong answer. I think the thing with Sama is that his position group is so loaded. You've already got Carson Hansen, who essentially took over as the starter, towards the end of last season. You've got River Peppers, you've got Dylan Lee, you've got a number of guys in that room that can get carries this season. Aiden Flora, I believe, is still there, at least for now. I don't know that he's transferring. He just roster cuts and all that. He's in a room where if he's not having a great game, he can, they can go to somebody else. And even if he's having, a really great season or whatever, they're still going to get other guys the football. Sama is he's not the workhorse back that like a Breece Hall or Dave Montgomery was. So like he can boom or bust, but I think if he busts, his bust can be, mitigated fairly well. So I wanted to go with Chase Soul here because I think his athleticism, his size, and his skills lend him to being, almost a 1-for-1 replacement for, Jaden Higgins in his first year, as far as he can be really good. He can be a dominant receiver just with his talent and his size, but he's a transfer receiver. Transfers can take a little bit of time to get integrated, to get up to speed with the offense, to get up to speed with Power 5 football. He also was, I think he was in practice eventually, but he sat out the first little bit of spring practice with an injury. So not that I don't think that's a big concern going forward, but it's just one of those things. He's got fewer snaps in the spring. And he's got, that's also a talented room to compete in as well. There's lots of guys there. But he was brought in to be a starter. And if he doesn't pan out, you really need a guy like Dom Overby or maybe Daniel Jackson or somebody else to step up into that X or Y, the X or the Y receiver spot and hope that they can take a big step forward. Because I think right now you're really hoping Chase Soul and Xavier Townsend both start, game one. But we'll see. There's a few different options. Xavier Townsend could be that one as well if he just can't. If the light doesn't switch on as far as being able to be a real downfield threat versus just on jet sweeps and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting. There's a lot of guys that I think can boom this year. I think Iowa State has a number of candidates that can take a huge step forward and have a big season. But we'll see. And Abisam is absolutely in that conversation. So that's a good suggestion as well from you, Dukester. All righty. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I think we're going to wrap her up for this week. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll try to get more conversation like this every single week. Instead, in the future, we're going to have some more, we'll have like trivia and things like that, some more fun off-season type stuff. I am currently working on getting an interview scheduled with a prominent person related to Iowa State football. Just working on getting that scheduled right now. So that interview hopefully is coming sometime soon. Then I'm also working on finding a co-host. So it's not just me monologuing up here for an hour all the time, because I'm sure you guys would like to hear somebody other than me talk on this show. So working on that as well. But everyone, I really appreciate you all coming and hanging out for this show. I would encourage you that if you're watching on Twitter, that you go over and check out the YouTube page and subscribe and all that good stuff. I'm going to throw it on here so you can see it's at Iowa State Voice of College Football right there. At Iowa State VOCFB. Would really appreciate you guys coming in and subscribing and liking all these videos, so that way we can get the channel out into the algorithm. I'm not typically one to bow down to the YouTube algorithm, but we need to get it out there. And sometimes it's kind of one of those things where YouTube wants you to have lots of likes and consistent views and all that good stuff, so that way it can get you in the rotation of people that consume Iowa State and college football things. So I would really appreciate all the comments, likes, and subscribes that you guys will give to the channel. And we will see you guys all again next Tuesday at 7 Central, 8 Eastern here on Iowa State at the Voice of College Football Network. Go State.